I promise I'm not going to do this all the time. This is just, it's a big Steven Spielberg, his movie references him growing up. I'm talking about The Fabelmans, a movie that is gradually, slowly being more and more revealed to be a pretty accurate portrayal of Steven Spielberg's life growing up, getting into movie making and dealing with his parents' divorce. And the trailers make it out to be something that I think it wasn't. What it is a lot more simple than I think a lot of people are going to expect. I do a podcast called This Week at the Movies with a friend, Matt Fox from the Music City Drive-In. And if you listen there, I talked a little bit about this movie already. So especially with this being my review for having seen it in a theater, I'm going to keep things pretty simple. I do look forward to a purchase of this on physical media. Particularly because of a few sequences that champion expression through art. Gabriel LaBelle as young Sam Fabelman is spectacular in this movie. I don't know how he pulled off some of what he pulled off. The entire cast of this was impressive. Michelle Williams as the mother is a standout. Paul Dano, in reaction to that, if acting is reacting, is another standout. Gabriel LaBelle is a fantastic lead. Again, there's a lot of him mostly reacting to the world around him, and I think this movie telegraphs in a lot of ways that the person making this movie is the star of the movie, which leads to one of the greatest final shots of a movie that I've seen recently. I want to give a particularly special shout out in the cast, though, to Judd Hirsch, who's a character who has to play an important role in the lead's life and doesn't appear until a third to a halfway through the movie and makes a really striking point that is the reason why I'm sitting in this bizarre shrine to Steven Spielberg with this whole nonsense going on. The idea of family and art being at a crossroads with one another sometimes is a difficult thing to balance, and I feel like there's a more complex conversation to be had about that, but this movie isn't really about complex conversations. It's about honoring the people that the story is about. And so to that, I gotta say there are a couple of flaws. One being the length of the movie. I think the pacing of this does not serve this sort of story in a way that I think works. Basically what I mean is there are things in this story that build up a sense of dread. Like, oh, so-and-so is looking at so-and-so a certain way. What does that mean about their relationship? And then you sort of wait, and by the time the information comes out, it's in ways that you don't expect, and it sort of feels like, yeah, I guess there wouldn't really be as much of a story if I had known the information that I know now. Or, on the flip side, the second a bully is introduced, and you know something is going to happen, you're dreading seeing the experiences of Sam Fabelman going through being bullied. Then you have the topic of mental health concerns for the mother and the way that is drawn out, and all of these things, there are points to be made about them, and there are experiences that you have to go through with them. But there's sort of a rule in comic book art that if every panel is filled with depth and is striking and is like a splash panel, then you're not going to feel as much reading through something like that. Now, this life is not a comic book. This is more sensitive than that, and I can appreciate that, and that's the reason why I really would definitely watch this movie again, and I'm going to purchase the movie. Paul Dano plays a father who, if we didn't know any better from real life, you would think is going to just have a revelation and become enraged, but there is a genuine, bitter sort of tragedy to the way that he adores Michelle Williams, and it leads him to have to make decisions for their life that I can't imagine, having to live through if I were Steven Spielberg. And that's the thing. There are biopics that come out all the time. You have Elvis that came out this year. You have movies that are just coming of age movies like Moonlight or Dazed and Confused, I don't know, like different movies that all have different intentions and feelings, and really it kind of feels when you start watching this movie like you know what you're gonna get, and then the ride is really exciting at parts, and it's really drawn out at times, and in the end it's just one more reason to appreciate somebody who there's already a lot to appreciate about. So when you're throwing another cherry on the top of a sundae, I don't think people are going to appreciate it as much, but I really think that this movie stands on its own, and I think the reason why they were trying to play down that this is a biopic about Steven Spielberg is because of the idea that people would not read more into the relationships and the story of a character trying to live caught between being there for family and being driven to do what he wants to do with his life. There's so many great little things about movie making. Like, you're introduced to this with just a description of what movies are, and that's so perfect because this character then learns to communicate through movie making almost to a fault, and by the time he has finally sort of, it's like a something that he is growing to understand more and more, and as he grows to understand it, he shapes people around him, and while he's still a child, you can tell he gets to a point that he understands where he points a camera and what edits he make is going to move an audience in a certain way. So I bet you there are going to be people who blow this movie way out of proportion into something that it's not, and there are going to be people who play this down as being lesser than movies about true stories that are pressing in terms of, you know, recent world events. But just because a story feels like you know what's going to happen doesn't always mean that it's not a story that's not a ride worth taking or a story worth telling. So leave a comment below, and I'm not gonna be cheesy enough and just say, like, tell me what was your favorite part? I guess I just did.